The market smelled like smoke, sweat, and fear. Metal cages lined the path, each one holding a being, some strong, some weak, most broken. Buyers walked past, dressed in rich alien robes, laughing, pointing, choosing their favorites like toys. In the last cage, at the very end of the row, sat a small girl. Her skin was pale purple, her bones showed through her thin arms, and her eyes were dull. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't cry. A metal tag hung from her neck, cold and sharp, with one word carved in bold: useless. The auctioneer banged his staff, his voice booming through the crowd. Next up, meat stock, he shouted. Too weak to work, too dull to please, but still plenty of flesh on the bones. The crowd laughed. Some even made jokes. Slice her thin. Maybe she tastes better that way, someone yelled. The girl didn't react. She had stopped reacting a long time ago. Her mind had learned to float, to leave her body when the pain got too much. She was ready for it to end. The auctioneer called out the starting bid. 10 credits, anyone? 10? No hands went up. 5? Anyone? No? Come on, she's still breathing. Still silence. The auctioneer frowned, wiping sweat from his brow. Fine, he growled. 3 credits. Final offer. Still no one moved. They turned away, more interested in the stronger slaves down the line. Just as the auctioneer was about to move on, a hand rose from the back. It was gloved, rough, and human. The crowd turned to look, surprised, even amused. The human was tall, wearing old work clothes and a tool belt. He didn't speak. He just nodded slowly. The auctioneer blinked. You, Warner? The man nodded again and held up 3 fingers. 3 credits sold to the human in the back. The crowd chuckled. Someone whispered, "What's he going to do with that one? Use her for scrap?" But the man said nothing. He walked forward, paid the coins, and opened the cage door. The girl didn't move. She thought it was a trick or maybe another test. The human crouched beside her, not touching, just waiting. He placed a soft cloth on the ground and held out a small piece of bread. Her stomach growled, but she looked away. She had been given food before and then beaten for eating it. But something about this man was different. He didn't force, didn't shout, didn't even look at her like she was trash. Minutes passed, then her hand slowly reached out. She took the bread, shaking, and nibbled it. He stood up and gently said, "Come." His voice was low but not harsh. She followed, limping slightly, eyes down. The crowd parted as the human walked through. Some laughed, some shook their heads, but he didn't care. He just kept walking. At the edge of the market, he helped her into an old transport cart. The seats were worn, the floor dusty. He sat in the front, started the engine. She sat quietly, in the back, hands holding the cloth tightly. The ride was silent. She kept glancing at him, confused, afraid. Why would a human buy her? What did he want? She had nothing to give, nothing worth saving. The vehicle stopped near a small metal building, a workshop surrounded by piles of tools, parts, and broken machines. The human opened the door and pointed inside. "Safe," he said, then walked. In ahead of her, inside. The air was warm and the lights were dim. He brought a cup of warm broth, set it on the table. She stood at the door, unsure, then slowly stepped inside. She drank, tears falling down her cheeks. Not because it hurt, but because for the first time it didn't hurt. No one yelled, no one hit, no one called her meat. The man brought her a blanket, thick and soft. He laid it on a small bed in the corner and turned away. She stared at it, then at him. Still shaking, still scared, he picked up a tool and began working. Didn't ask her questions. Didn't touch her, he just let her be. She sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping the blanket around herself. For the first time in her life, she wasn't in a cage. She wasn't a thing to be sold. She was just there. And in that quiet moment, she wondered. The workshop smelled like old metal, oil, and dust. Strange machines stood in every corner, some broken, some half-built. Tools hung from the walls like sleeping animals. Quiet. Waiting. The alien girl sat quietly on the small bed. The blanket wrapped around her tiny frame like a shield. She didn't understand this place or this man. But it was warm and no one yelled at her. That alone felt like magic. The human didn't talk much. He worked at a table, fixing a broken drone. His hands were rough, but gentle with the parts. The sound of clicking tools filled the air. It wasn't loud, just steady like a heartbeat. The girl watched him with quiet eyes. She wanted to ask what he wanted from her, why he bought her, why he didn't touch her or command her. But her voice had grown weak, unused. She held her knees to her chest and just listened to the silence. That night, the human brought her a bowl of warm food, simple broth, with soft bread inside. She didn't move at first, unsure if it was a trick, but he just left it by her side and went back to his tools. Minutes passed. The smell was too kind, too soft. She picked up the bowl with shaking hands and drank it slowly. It was the first meal that didn't taste like fear. When he finished his work, the human walked to a small shelf. He pulled out a thin mat and laid it on the floor across the room. Then, without a word, he lay down and turned away from her. He didn't lock the door, didn't chain her. He trusted her even though she didn't trust herself. She didn't sleep. Her eyes stayed open all night, staring at the human's back, waiting for the shouting to come, the strike, the order, but it never did. Morning came. Sunlight crept through the dirty windows and touched the machines with gold. The human stood, stretched, and started boiling water. He looked at her once and said gently, "Good morning," then went back to work. She sat up slowly, her body still sore. Her hands trembled as she reached for a cup he had left. The water was warm, not hot, and tasted clean. She drank it all. Days passed like this. Quiet, slow, strange. Each morning he brought her food and water. Each night he made a bed for himself on the floor. He never touched her, never asked anything from her. Only once he said, "You can stay if you want." That sentence stayed in her head like a song. No one had ever said that before. Not her kind, not any kind. You can stay. One afternoon, she walked slowly around the workshop, her feet still weak but stronger than before. She saw machines with glowing wires and dusty panels. She saw a drawing on the wall, blueprints for something that looked like a flying chair. She stopped in front of a broken helper bot. It looked like her, bent, forgotten, covered in rust. She touched its arm gently. The human looked up from his table. "You like machines?" he asked. She didn't answer, just nodded a little. He walked over and handed her a small screwdriver. "Try," he said, pointing to the bot's open chest panel. Her hands shook as she took it. She hadn't held anything in weeks. She bent down and looked inside the machine. Wires were tangled, metal cracked, but for the first time her mind didn't feel foggy. It felt sharp, awake, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. She worked slowly, unsure. He stayed nearby but didn't help, only watched, his eyes soft. After an hour, the bot's eyes blinked once, dim but alive. She gasped, pulling back. The bot twitched, then shut down again. But she smiled, just a little. "You fixed it," the man said. "No," she whispered. "Just touched it." He smiled back. "That's more than anyone else did." That night, she didn't cry. For the first time in years, she felt something other than fear. She didn't know what it was, but it felt like hope. She lay under the blanket, staring at the ceiling. Outside, stars blinked in the dark sky. She remembered her home world, the cold halls, the hunger, the punishment. There were no stars there. They never let them look up, only down, only into cages. But here, she looked up, and somewhere deep inside, she started to believe that maybe she was not useless. Maybe someone saw something different, and maybe she could too. The night was quiet. Only the sound of machines humming in the background filled the air. The girl lay under the blanket, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Her body was still, but her mind screamed. The moment she closed her eyes, the memories came back. Chains around her wrists, cold floors, sharp voices yelling in a language meant to hurt, hands pulling her hair, slapping her face when she didn't obey fast enough. The auction block wasn't her first cage. It was just the final one. She sat up suddenly, heart pounding, breath shaky. Her skin felt cold, like she had fallen into water. Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. Crying never helped. Not before, not ever. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Slow and heavy. The human stepped into the room, holding a cup of warm liquid. He placed it on the table beside her bed and knelt down. "You okay?" he asked softly. She didn't answer, just looked at him with eyes full of fear. He didn't push, didn't try to touch her. Instead, he pulled a small cloth from his pocket and gently placed it near her hand. "I used to have nightmares too," he said, staring at the floor. "After the war." She blinked, surprised. He spoke again. "I'd wake up thinking I was still in the fire." She looked at the cup, then slowly picked it up with both hands. It smelled like spice and honey. It warmed her chest as she sipped it, but the pain didn't leave. She whispered something then, barely loud enough to hear. "What do you want from me?" Her voice cracked like a broken wire, weak and full of doubt. The human paused, then answered, "Nothing." She stared, confused. "No one wants nothing," she said quietly. "I'm broken." He looked at her now, his eyes calm. "Everything breaks," he said. "But some things still have light inside." She looked away, her hands shaking again. "My people said I was cursed," she whispered. "Too small, too weak, born on a red eclipse. They said I brought bad luck." He didn't laugh, didn't mock her. He listened. That was new. No one ever listened before. "I was sent to the orphan pits," she continued. "They gave us numbers, not names. I watched others disappear every week. Some for labor, some for meat." Her voice dropped, barely a breath. "I survived by staying quiet, by becoming nothing." The human sat down on the floor beside her bed. Not too close, not too far. "I don't think you're nothing," he said gently. "I think you've been through more than anyone should." She wanted to believe him, but the voice in her head said he was lying, that he would sell her again once she was strong, that he was just waiting for the right price. Still, something about his words held her still, like a thread pulling her away from the edge. The next day she asked for a wrench. Her hands still trembled, but she tried. The human gave her small tasks, cleaning a panel, reconnecting wires. He showed her how to hold the tools properly. He smiled when she got it right. Every time he smiled, a part of her heart felt strange. It hurt, but not in a bad way, like muscles waking up after a long sleep. That night, she had another nightmare. She screamed, loud, desperate, and this time she didn't wake alone. The human rushed in, kneeled. Beside her bed, she pushed him away at first, fists hitting his chest, but he didn't move, didn't shout, didn't leave. He just said, "You're safe," over and over, like a shield made of words. She cried then, like a child, like she had never cried before. Her body shook, but his voice was steady. "You're safe here," he said again. And this time she believed it. Just a little, in the morning. She found the blanket tucked around her tighter than before, and beside her bed was a small metal box. Inside it, a nameplate made from scrap metal, carved carefully. He had written a name on it, not a number, not a label, just one word. Lyra. She held it close to her chest, her eyes wide. That was her name. No one had ever given her one, and now it felt like she had been given a piece of the sky. Lyra stood at the edge of the workshop. Sunlight touched her face through the broken window. For the first time, she didn't look at the floor. She looked outside. The world beyond the metal walls seemed wide, strange. There were trees with purple leaves, wind that carried soft dust, and a sky that stretched forever. She had never seen so much space. She had never felt so small, and yet free. The human walked past her carrying a basket of spare parts. He glanced at her and smiled. "You ready to help today?" he asked. She nodded slowly, still not used to her voice, but her hands were steadier now. Her eyes clearer. They worked side by side. He fixed engines, she cleaned wiring. She asked questions sometimes, short ones. "What is this? Why does it spark?" He always answered with patience, never rushed her, never laughed. Every time she completed a task, she felt a flicker of warmth inside, like something broken was beginning to move again. By afternoon, the human stopped working and stretched. He looked at her and said, "Come with me, I want to show you something." Lyra hesitated, then followed. They walked up a hill behind the workshop. The ground was rocky, but the sky above was turning deep blue. When they reached the top, the view made her breath catch. Stars. So many stars. They sparkled like tiny fires in a dark ocean. Some were red, some blue, some gold. She had never seen them like this. Back, in the pits, they were told stars didn't matter, that light from above was for the worthy, and she had been born below, underground, under shame. The human sat down on a flat stone. "This was my favorite spot after the war," he said. "When things felt heavy, I'd come here and look up." Lyra sat beside him, silent, her eyes wide. "They look alive," she whispered. "They are," he replied. "Some are suns, some have planets, some may even have people looking back." She smiled softly. It was small, but real, and when she smiled, something inside the human shifted too. He didn't say anything, just leaned back and watched the stars with her. They stayed there for a long time. No words, just sky, no fear, just stillness. But far below the hill, in the shadows of the market district, someone else was watching too. A scarred alien with yellow eyes stood near a wall. He stared at a worn-out hollow poster showing a list of missing or stolen assets. Lyra's old number was on that list, and, beside it, a bounty, small but enough to attract attention. He tapped a device, sending a message to an old trader contact. "Found the meat. Someone's keeping it alive." Back on the hill, Lyra reached out slowly. Her fingers touched a small, silver star-shaped charm the human wore around his neck. "What's that?" she asked. "It's a memory," he said. "My sister gave it to me before I left Earth." "Where is she now?" "Gone," he answered softly. "She didn't make it through the war." Lyra lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. He looked at her and said, "You remind me of her." She was quiet but strong. The wind picked up a little, rustling the trees behind them. Lyra pulled the blanket around her shoulders tighter. She still wore it sometimes, like armor, but she was starting to add other things too. Pockets for tools, a belt for scrap parts, even a small badge with her new name, Lyra. She stood up, her voice a little stronger now. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For letting me see the stars." He smiled. "You were always meant to." That night she couldn't sleep, not because of fear, but because of something else. A strange warmth in her chest, a hope. She looked at the nameplate beside her, bed again, touched the small star charm he had let her hold for a while and whispered, "I don't want to go back." Then louder, "I won't go back." But outside the window, unseen by either of them, a message was blinking on a bounty. Hunter's comlink, location locked, target marked, reward pending. The past hadn't forgotten her, and it was coming. The morning felt normal. Birds circled above the dusty hill and machines buzzed in the workshop. Lyra wiped sweat from her forehead as she sorted wires into neat little piles. Her fingers moved with purpose now, not like before when they only trembled. The human worked across from her, face calm, hands steady. He hummed an old Earth tune while fixing a damaged panel. The place felt like home, not just shelter. Lyra had started to believe the worst was behind her, but evil doesn't knock. It breaks in. A loud sound echoed through the metal yard. A sharp, mechanical hiss. Lyra turned quickly, eyes narrowing. Two large, armored transports rolled up the dirt path, kicking up clouds of orange dust. She stepped back, heart racing. The human looked up too, his smile fading. He set down his tools and walked to the edge of the workshop. The first transport door opened with a hiss. Out stepped a tall alien with a scar across his face, yellow eyes glowing like fire. Two more followed, armed, armored, cold. The first one smiled like a knife. "Long time, little meat," he said, looking at Lyra. Lyra froze, her hands shaking, her feet locked to the ground. The voice, it was real, from the auction pits. He was one of the traders who dragged her by the neck. The human stepped between them, calm but firm. "She's not yours," he said. The scarred alien laughed. "She was marked for flesh. She was bought for butchering, not given a second chance. She was bought." The human repeated, "By me. She's free now." "Free?" The trader smirked. "Nothing is free, not in this galaxy." He stepped closer, but the human didn't move. "I'll give you double what you paid," the trader said. "Just hand her over." "No," the human said, voice like steel. "I don't sell souls." The trader's smile disappeared. "Wrong answer," he growled. With a wave of his hand, one of the guards raised a blaster. Lyra gasped. "No," she shouted, stepping forward. But the human raised a hand, silently signaling her to stay back. The tension was thick. One wrong move and the place could turn into a firestorm. But the human didn't reach for a weapon. He only stared straight into the trader's eyes. "You'll have to go through me," he said. The scarred alien didn't wait. He snapped his fingers, and the guards moved in. But before they could take another step, the workshop lit up. Lyra had done more than organize wires these past few weeks. She had connected motion sensors, powered up defense drones, and coded alerts. From the corners of the roof, small machines activated with sharp clicks. Red lights blinked, and metallic. Arms unfolded with warning tones, the guards froze, weapons raised, unsure. The trader cursed, "What is this?" "She's not the same girl you caged," the human said. "She built this." Lyra stepped out from behind the table now. She was still small, still quiet, but no longer shaking. She held a remote in one hand, her thumb resting on the power trigger. "I am not meat," she said clearly. "I am not for sale." The trader laughed again, but it was thinner now, forced. "You think this is over?" he hissed. "You think we won't return?" Lyra stepped closer, her voice steady. "I don't care if you return. Next time you'll face more than machines, or you'll face me." The drones buzzed louder, lasers glowing at their tips. The trader raised his hands and motioned his guards to stand down. He backed away slowly, sneering. "This isn't the end, human," he spat. "You can't protect trash forever." The human's eyes didn't blink. "She's not trash," he said quietly. "She's the strongest soul I've ever met." With that, the traders returned to their transport and drove off, leaving smoke behind. Inside the workshop, silence fell again. Lyra collapsed to her knees, the remote falling from her hands. The human rushed to her side, helping her sit. "I was so scared," she whispered. "But I didn't want to run." "You didn't," he said. "You stood your ground. I thought, and if I showed fear, they'd win." He nodded slowly. "You were right." She looked up at him, her voice small. "Will they come back?" "Maybe," he said. "But next time they'll find something stronger than they ever expected." She wiped her eyes, not tears of fear, but tears of pride. Not because she was safe, but because she had protected herself. And deep inside, something had changed forever. She was no longer running, she was rising. The sun rose behind clouds of smoke and dust, but inside the workshop, a different kind of light burned, quiet, steady, and strong. It was the light inside Lyra, a fire that had been hidden for years, now starting to glow bright. She didn't sleep much after the traders left. Her hands worked through the night, building, fixing, learning. Each screw she turned, each wire she connected, it all meant something now. It meant she was not weak, not a toy, not a meal. The human noticed the change. He no longer gave her tasks. She made her own. She upgraded the drones, added voice commands, coded night surveillance. She even repaired the outer walls of the workshop with scrap armor plates. "You've become something else," he said one morning, watching her weld metal with sparks flying. Lyra smiled, her face smudged with oil. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she replied, "and I won't let you get hurt again." He chuckled. "I should be scared. You're better at this than me now." She looked at him serious. "You saved me," she said. "I'm not letting them take that away." In her free time, she trained. She practiced with a broken staff, swinging it until her arms ached. She watched videos the human gave her, self-defense guides, war logs, tactics. Her mind absorbed everything, like it had waited her whole life to wake up. Sometimes she stopped and stared at her reflection in a polished metal sheet. Her eyes were no longer dull. Her arms were still thin but stronger. She had scars, yes, but they no longer meant weakness. They were proof she survived. One evening, the human walked in with a surprise, a small metal suit, handmade, light and flexible. "I found some old combat parts," he said. "Thought you might like to build your own armor." Lyra's eyes widened. She touched the pieces like they were treasure. "I've never had armor," she whispered. "You never needed it," he replied. "But now you'll wear it with pride." For the next 2 weeks, Lyra didn't stop. She shaped the metal to fit her frame, light but strong. She carved her name into the chest plate. Lyra, not a number, not a label. She painted it with stripes of blue and silver, the colors of the sky she had once feared she'd never see again. But as the armor was built, so was something else. A warning system picked up strange signals near the edge of the valley. Unfamiliar heat signatures, slow, careful movements. She knew the traders were testing them, looking for a weak spot. She told the human, and he nodded. "They'll come," he said. "But they'll find a different girl than the one they tried to break." Lyra stood on the hill one night staring at the stars again. But this time she didn't feel small. She felt ready. In her hand, she held the staff she rebuilt from scrap and old tech. It crackled softly with electricity, a weapon she made with her own hands. She whispered into the night, "I'm not scared of you anymore. I know what I am now. I'm not your property. I'm not your meat. I'm Lyra." Down, below, the lights of the workshop glowed warm and steady. Inside, the human worked on something he hadn't shown her yet. A surprise. Something important. He wanted her to have more than safety. He wanted her to have a future, but even he didn't know how soon they'd need to fight again. The traders weren't giving up. This time they were bringing more. Heavily armed, better prepared, but so was Lyra. She had turned fear into fire, pain into power. She had turned a dusty workshop into a fortress. And if they thought she was going to run, they didn't understand what she had become. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was waiting. The morning was too still. No birds, no wind, no sound of humming machines, only silence. And in that silence, Lyra stood tall, wearing the armor she built with her own hands. Her eyes were sharp, focused. She wasn't trembling anymore. Not the broken girl in the cage, not the silent ghost from the pits. She was Lyra now, and she was ready. Inside the workshop, the human tightened the last bolt on something covered by a gray tarp. He looked at her once, nodding. "They'll be here soon," he said. "I know," she answered. "Let them come." The scanners picked up movement near the east ridge. Multiple heat signatures moving fast. Lyra tapped her wrist device, activating defense drones, turrets, and shield barriers. The entire workshop came alive like a sleeping beast awakened. The traders returned in full force. Not just 3 this time, but 6 armored transports, weapons glowing, engines roaring. Their leader stepped out. The same scarred alien with yellow eyes. But now, his smirk was gone. He looked up at the hill where Lyra stood in her armor, holding her staff. He laughed bitterly. "So the meat thinks it's a warrior now?" Lyra didn't respond. She activated her comm link and said calmly, "This is your last warning." He lifted his arm, and the attack began. Blasters fired. Machines stormed forward. Engines screamed through the valley. But Lyra was already moving. She darted through the battlefield like lightning. Her drones flew above, spraying smoke, redirecting lasers, shielding the workshop. Turrets spun and fired with precision, every shot controlled by her commands. The traders thought they'd find a scared little girl, but instead they found a soldier, not trained in a military academy, but trained by pain, survival, and the man who saw her soul before she did. One of the guards reached the outer wall. Lyra met him head-on. He was twice her size, armored, brutal. But her movements were clean, sharp, practiced. She ducked his swing and slammed her electrified staff into his chest plate, sending him crashing to the ground. Another one tried to sneak around. Lyra's trap caught him. A net of charged wire wrapped around his body, shocking him into unconsciousness. Inside the workshop, the human worked quickly. He uncovered a small hoverpod, its engine humming softly. It was built for one reason: to escape if everything failed. But he didn't plan to use it himself. He built it for her, just in case. Outside, Lyra was surrounded now. 3 traders circled her, weapons raised, eyes full of hate. "Back in the cage, freak," one hissed. "You're worth more dead than dressed like a hero." Lyra's eyes didn't flinch. She said quietly, "I was never yours." And with a flash of motion, she threw down a smoke charge, disappearing into the cloud. In the confusion, she moved like a shadow, striking, dodging, vanishing again. Her staff found its mark again and again, until only one figure remained. The scarred leader himself, stood over her as the smoke cleared, his blade aimed at her chest. "You think one human's kindness makes you special?" he growled. "You're still nothing. Just meat someone forgot to cook." Lyra stared at him. Her voice was calm. "I was nothing. But he saw me." She raised her staff and blocked his blade with a crackling spark, then swung low, knocking. His legs from under him, he fell hard, stunned. Lyra stood over him now. She could strike, end it, destroy him, but she didn't. She lowered her weapon and said, "I don't need to kill you, because I've already won." Behind her, the human appeared, limping slightly, holding a signal device. He pressed a button, activating a distress beacon. Federation patrols would arrive soon. The traders would be arrested. The bounty wiped clean. The battle was over. Lyra returned to the workshop, armor scorched, face covered in dust. But her smile was real, wide, bright. The human sat down with a heavy sigh, wiping blood from his arm. She walked over and wrapped her arms around him. He didn't move for a moment, then hugged her back. "You protected it all," he said. "I protected you," she whispered, "and everything you gave me." Weeks later, the workshop became more than a place of machines. It became a refuge for others like her. Alien girls, lost boys, broken souls, all rescued, all given names, not numbers, and Lyra was their teacher, their leader, their proof. That even someone labeled useless could rise. That a soul once sold for flesh could be saved, not by power, not by force, but by one quiet human who chose to see something worth saving, and by one girl who believed him.